My name is Delmar Larson. I am the founder and director of the LibreTexts project. I'm also a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. And the LibreTexts project is a culmination of about close to 15 years of work. We've been in the OER community and business for a while. And I wear multiple hats when I talk. Sometimes I'll talk from the perspective of an adopter, and because I've been using OER in all my classes for the last 5 years or so, most of which I've been constructing myself or remixing myself. I'm also talking as a platform developer based off the LibreTexts project, obviously. And lastly, I'll be talking about things from the perspective of co-chair of the OER program on my campus. And such. So again, thank you for attending. The way that I actually would like this workshop to proceed is, let me go through about 20-25 minutes of pre-made presentations just to lay the groundwork, and then we roll with doing various things, going through different aspects associated with the technologies that we have available for the community. You may have been exposed to this during this meeting. This was some upshots from the 2016 Babson survey research group focusing on OER and the adoption of OER. And there were a variety of reasons that were identified for faculty at this time. This 5 years ago, but it's still quite applicable today. There are a variety of reasons that faculty have expressed about why they haven't adopted OER. Some of them include the difficulty to find the content that they want, the lack of resources in their subject, concerns about updating and curating the content, quality is always an issue, permissioning capabilities, lack of track record, and a handful of other things here. And the whole essence behind the LibreTexts project is to build a platform in order to address essentially all these issues. And again, because we are faculty and academia in my team, we're baked into how to actually use OER in the classroom. So let me start with just the mission statement of the LibreTexts project. This is the statement that I give out. It's not our formal mission statement, but it's the one that I actually like to use. We're implementing a community-built OER platform for construction, curation, adoption, and each of those 4 components are particularly important for it. That is comprehensive in nature and can be curated at multiple levels. You can consider these as the 3 C's of our project. So community means you and anyone who's willing to contribute to the open community broadly defined. OER, as you've probably been exposed to or already know, is in some cases an ill-defined nature. There's lots of debates behind that, other than the basic premise that you have an openly licensed license connected to it. The LibreTexts is comprehensive in that we follow a no gap left behind policy. So no field is off limits for the scope of the LibreTexts project. It is the successor to the ChemWiki, which was the project that we started 15 years ago. In order to obviously address chemistry, but it's expanded far beyond that. We also follow no gap left behind policy, no tech left behind policy. And that's essentially arguing that as emerging technologies become available, more specifically open source technologies, we will commandeer that technology and implement it into our system such that people can utilize it without having to go through the effort in order to implement it into their appropriate technologies. And we do that because we believe strongly in the synergy and operating at scale in order to be able to make it so people can benefit from that. Lastly, the content on our platform is curated, and that's a key aspect because it means essentially that content is never done, and that tracks academia and scholarship in general, and you need to have a resource that tracks that or mirrors that aspect of a dynamic living library. An example of that, or the opposite of that, would be something along the lines of a series of PDFs. Difficult in order to curate, difficult in order to be able to edit, and it's difficult in order to be able to keep it up to date as you want to do it. So what is the LibreTexts project? But depending upon who you talk to, you'll get different responses back from here. The first aspect I want to do is from the author or construction perspective, and that's the LibreText is a powerful construction platform. In fact, I argue it's the most powerful construction platform out there. And again, this is built primarily from the perspective of our classes of the development team in order to be able to hone and build what we feel is necessary and what we know is necessary for our respective classes in order to be able to get OER into it. LibreText is used as a dissemination platform. In fact, it's the largest centralized OER platform out there of content if you don't take into account Wikipedia as the infrastructure. And we currently host about 2,000 pages, centrally located, centrally curated for people to be able to capitalize on. And I'll go into more detail off of that. And lastly, the LibreText is used as a learning platform. This is the student perspective off of that. And that entails being able to identify and effectively distribute the content and use it as a mechanism for students in order to augment their educational experience. And that is ultimately the successor for any OER resource. Or any ed tech resource as a whole in order to be able to dictate its efficacy. So the LibreText project is the name LibreText suggests it's only textbooks, but the LibreText project is the underlying aspect is what we refer to as the LibreVerse. And the LibreVerse consists of multiple interconnected but independently operating servers in order to handle different features in order to address each of those three aspects that I mentioned before here. And a key component of the LibreVerse are our libraries. And so we have 14 independently operating libraries focusing on specific fields or specific groups of fields that hosts our OER content. The content that we have here is hosted within wiki-based technologies, and we selected wiki technologies because it's the best technology for large-scale collaborative construction efforts, hands down. And I'll be showing to you that momentarily. The content in the textbooks are then decorated with ancillary technologies in order to augment the nature of the textbook, because anyone who's been paying attention to the textbook over the last handful of years have identified that the nature of the textbook has been changing significantly. So for that case, we built technologies in order to handle homework, summative and formative assessment infrastructure. We implemented a Jupyter Notebook system for embedding executable code into our books. For example, if you're teaching a statistics book, you can have R code directly into your book, or Python or Octave or C++, and up to 30 different languages that the Jupyter Notebook system has available. We have several servers in order to provide ancillary components. The JavaScript server hosts a range of different technologies that are then available in order to be able to be used in order to build resources. We have a learning analytics infrastructure that's part of the student-facing approach that gives the opportunity for tracking how students interact with the resource, that whether it's a textbook or the homework system, and provide that information back to the instructor of record as needed for standard, or as standard operating procedure would justify. That can then be co-opted into running research programs under appropriate IRB approach. And I could talk about that later on. We have a bot server, which is meant in order to facilitate curation of our content, so we can do large targeted global changes across our project as things change. The Commons and Conductor technology is a technology designed in order to facilitate the building and curating of OER content. It's not the actual, let me rephrase it, the organizing of building and creating content. This is the first time I'm actually going to be introducing this publicly. So bear with me when I actually go through some of the steps behind that. And then we have a series of forums in order to facilitate a community conversation, dictated for both community and also curation boards necessary in order to move things forward. Again, the basic principle there is that nothing is static, and we need to break the paradigm of viewing things as a static book. It needs to be dynamic. Now, I mentioned that we are the largest, most popular, centrally distributed OER content out there, at least in terms of textbooks. And this is a manifested in terms of our traffic. We've delivered close to or over 3/4 billion page views since we started, and we've been growing exponentially. This was a little bit of a bump associated with Google, but as it grows, we've collected somewhere in the order of 6 millennia of confirmed student reading out there. And these numbers are not 100% up to date, but we have lots of books distributed in lots of libraries for people to capitalize on and to build off of that. So let me get a little bit into how we operate. So if you're new to the OER universe, it can be really quite daunting because there's content distributed in a variety of different spots out there. If you've been in the OER universe for a period of time, you've tended to learn how to traverse these things. You can find content in the Open Textbook Library. Actually, technically, you can find links in the Open Textbook Library to contents referatory. OER Commons is largely referatory, although it does have content off there too. OpenStax has true content as a repository. Merlot is referatory mostly, but it has some open aspects. Open SUNY, Galileo, Open Oregon, NOVA, BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Alberta, Hawaii, Sailor, Cal State University System, Oregon State University, and many, many other places. What this means is essentially this OER distributed in a variety of repositories or links to repositories. And complementing that, we have a lot of OER content stored on individual professors' computers. And because a lot of content that's created for classes, the instructor would fall in line, would be allowing it to be openly licensed if requested and appropriately helped out with there. The key aspect of it here is that having content distributed in a variety of spots is counterproductive. It's counterproductive for finding it, and that's one of the aspects of that Babson study I showed before, but it's counterproductive for curating it, because if you have replicas of various content in a variety of sources, one person improves one aspect of that source, another individual or another repository improves another aspect of that source, it's effectively fragmented or forked. And it becomes difficult in order to bring it back together because there's no effective versioning control capabilities. What we are doing is taking all that content that we can and integrating it into our libraries. We call that process harvesting. And it's a very time-intensive process in some cases, depending upon the nature of the format. So if you harvest from PDFs, it's more painful than if you harvest from LaTeX, or if you harvest from Word documents, Google Docs, handwritten documents, websites, press books, and a variety of other things. We have a whole range of different formats, and we have a team of 100 undergraduate students that are largely going through and integrating these things together so that they are centralized, standardized, interconvertible. Because they're standardized, we can build them in terms of collections, aka books, or books that follow organization of commercial books. It then provides opportunity of it being flexible because you can mix and match effectively without having to deal with the issues associated with copying and pasting. And anyone who's ever tried to copy and paste from a PDF understands that pain, and I presume that most of us, if not all of us, have done so. And more importantly, a central infrastructure that's curatable. In order to address the aspects of people benefiting or improving content in a variety of different sources by bringing them together. So we're building a better bucket of Legos that enables people who want to build the vision that they've constructed. They can do so with all the parts that are able to mix together, instead of a mixture of Duplos, Legos, Lincoln blocks, and a wide range of other components that don't play well together. Each of the pages on our content has an editor. It's an editor that is quite ubiquitous on the internet today, called CK Editor. It's found in a lot of learning management systems. If you can edit on your learning management system, you can edit on our site. Intrinsically to editing on our page, we have a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get interface, and we have a back source page that uses what's called hypertext markup language, HTML, which underlies all the content that we have. That gives us the ability, in order to not just being able to easily utilize the power of the markup language, but it gives you the ability of taking this content and taking it off of our site. Although, like I argued, that then facilitates fragmentation. So let me skip over that. I mentioned the Jupyter system as a mechanism in order to augment traditional HTML with more advanced features, because again, the nature of the textbook is changing. You want to be able to adapt the textbook in order to deal with that. And that means introducing more interactive capabilities, more visualizations, more than just text and images. And this is a picture in my quantum mechanics book that has a Python code that students access because it's important for students in STEM fields, especially physical STEM fields, in order to get exposed to coding, and they can manipulate the code and run it directly here. And they can do this on their phone, on a bus, as long as they have access to the internet in order to do these things without having to download the code and compile it and go through the process that's there. I mentioned community as a key aspect of how we operate, because we have things centralized and we go through an effort in order to take existing content that has utility into our LibreVerse. We can then use that in order to be able to augment things. Like, for example, this was I think this, I guess it's a couple years ago. I got this just a few days before I taught distillation for my general chemistry class. And this was a post that someone paid up. That's a Python script. And this guy, and I still don't know his real name, posted this on Twitter. Got the code, popped it in, and I was able to use it in my classroom right then and there. And that is the power of the community in order to move things forward. Okay, so the infrastructure that we have here, so we built this corpus that consists of about 500,000 pages for people to be able to capitalize on, these Lego blocks that I was talking about in order to build your book. However, in the process of doing so, we standardize it, but we need to be able to do more than that. We start to introduce cross-referencing, meta tag information, learning objectives and such at the page level, not at the book level or at the chapter level, and it provides a mechanism in order to do effective searches off of it. And we're still building this. As a time-consuming process, but it's still moving forward. That goes beyond than what you just get at the book level. But the key point is that this corpus is exceedingly big. And even with appropriate meta tagging and cross-referencing in order to be able to find the content, you need to be able to have a technique or a mechanism in order to take the content and put it together into the book that you want. And that is the remixer. And the OER remixer, it's in its 3rd year, and hopefully we're going to be updating this spring into version 3.0. And it's arguably, and of course I'm very biased here, the best technology out there in order to be able to build a book from existing content, because you can just basically do a simple drag and drop, and I'll show this live, from content in the corpus, which again is 500,000 pages, grab them and bring them over, and you can curate and organize these things in a variety of ways. And then there are some beneficial components or value-added components to this technology, including being able to automatically renumber things, delete things, and a handful of other aspects associated. It's a fairly simple technology, but it's exceedingly powerful technology in order to be able to build these things and not have to worry about renumbering problems in a variety of sense. I also mentioned when I was talking about the LibreVerse, the learning analytics structure. And this is an example of what would come out of the learning analytics. And this is relatively dated. It's about 8 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. No, 8 years ago. I'm not doing my math very well. Where we did a study in order to evaluate the efficacy of the textbook. So just to emphasize something I'm pretty sure you guys are aware before, the true efficacy of an OER resource, and let me phrase that, of a textbook, whether it is an OER resource or it is a commercial resource, is demonstrating learning in the students. And that means that 99% of OER content is unvetted within that perspective. And that is also included for commercial products. The aspect behind what we're building here is the learning analytics infrastructure. So you can actually build your system within the LibreText and then test the efficacy in terms of learning objectives and ask the question, is this good or could it be improved in order to be able to augment learning experience? That is the true metric of success for resources, not how big the book is or how pretty the book is or how many names are on the book. But this is another aspect that comes from the analytics. And this is a class that I did. I actually taught 2 back-to-back classes, one with a control experiment of a commercial textbook and one with the ChemWiki, the precursor to the LibreText. Both 500 student classes. It was a very unpleasant quarter to teach. But we were able to, and this is just one metric, this is the aggregate traffic per day. And what you can see here, as you'd expect, is that on the day before the exam, we got lots and lots of students studying. So they're cramming. Now, cramming is not a new concept for any of us, but we see the numerical metric of how much students cram. And then we can also correlate that. I don't have the reference here, correlate that to the impact on the performance. So the crammers tended to do about 10% poorer than the non-crammers. And what we're interested in is the impact of cramming on subsequent classes. So the long-term retention of cramming, not just the short-term benefits off of this. And these are examples in which you can use in order to guide pedagogy. For example, the subsequent quarter I taught over the summer, different size class, different nature of students, can't really compare the two. But what I did is I wanted the background to be the default. So I gave weekly quizzes instead of every 3-week midterms. And the general background is much higher here than they are right here. Now I don't have because they're different nature students, I can't do a comparison in terms of student performance, but the key point is that these analytics can be exceedingly useful in order to guide pedagogy off of things, not just evaluating efficacy of the resource. The LibreTexts project has a wide range of distribution mechanisms that's out there. And so the one that we're going to be going through today will be the website access, but we can also distribute content in PDFs. We can embed into learning management systems via common cartridge. We can give out the files that you can then print them up via Lulu Express or via Amazon. The EPUB export is almost ready to be distributed, and we use it as a mechanism in order to handle accessibility requirements, which is required by Title VIII. We can print out physical books, and here's a physical book, and these things cost about $12 to $15, and they purchase it at cost. We also can host these things on Raspberry Pis. These are little mini computers. They act as a hotspot, and then if you're in an area that has no internet access, you can still be able to tap into your content electronically if you have a Wi-Fi enabled device. For example, if you're in a submarine underneath the ocean, you're in the Andes, or you're in the middle of farmland that has limited or no high-speed internet access, or you're in inner city. Actually, I'm thinking of inner city, but if you're in areas that you don't have the financial background in order to do that, which is something that we noticed with the COVID situation here in California, this provides a mechanism in order to be able to distribute that effectively, and it costs about $40, $50 in order to get the hardware for doing that. I'm going to be introducing the LibreNet. And if you remember, I was talking about the LibreNet as a project organization device. It's exceedingly powerful for building, curating of content or content of projects that's off of it. And I'll postpone that because I want to do that live. I don't want to go through the picture here. Lastly, I want to talk about the homework system. So we knew for a long time that we wanted to build a homework system to accompany the OER textbooks that we have. We wanted it to be as free as possible. However, we do need to maintain some sustainability because it runs on servers, and if we can't sustain it, then no one can benefit from it. And we built a system that we call ADAPT. And ADAPT is designed to operate on 3 and soon to be more technologies that have already been created, that have a community around them in order to both build problems, distribute problems, and discuss the nature of these problems. That's WebWork, which is one of the earliest homework systems out there from upstate New York, from Rochester. iMath AS, which is a technology that was ported from WebWork, and that's the technology that underlies MyOpenMath or Lumen's OHM system. It's the same technology. It's just different names on top of it. And then there's H5P, which is a technology that came out of Norway, which is very graphical, while these two are both very algorithmic, numerical based in the approach that's out there. So the ADAPT homework system implements each of these things, but we're also implementing additional features like technologies to handle organic chemistry, spreadsheets, integrating Jupyter. We have clicker questions or clicker capabilities in in the system, and a handful of other technologies as it's evolving. So the ADAPT system is a catch-all of various things, but it's exceedingly powerful because no one technology is able to handle every different field that's out there. So instead of trying to force technologies in order to address different fields, let's integrate them all within ADAPT so that everyone can interface to these technologies in the same way, irrespective of the nature of the technology. So we hide everything into ADAPT system. That's sometimes referred to as an abstraction layer, if you're familiar with the terminology in computer science off of there. And this is the aspect behind it, is that each of the web work, iMath, AS, and H5P has their own unique problem builder, problem library, problem searcher, accessibility deliver, assessment checker, gradebook, and LMS interface. Not overly surprising that they'd be different because they're created by different people in order to do different technologies. The key aspect is that when you get an instructor to use one versus the other, it's a barrier. What we can do is gut the problem library, make a centralized library, gut the problem searcher capabilities, centralize that, centralize the gradebook. So it has a centralized the interface to a learning management system. So these technologies are essentially making a problem, delivering a problem, and evaluating if the problem is true. And everything else is ADAPT. And that gives us a great deal of freedom in order to be able to not have to deal with these other issues of these technologies. And I'll step through that stuff. So this is a graphical interface of how the ADAPT homework system does. And the details are not overly important here. The key aspect is that the ADAPT homework system right here sits on top of these individual servers, which are all running independently. People you can access these things directly. For example, the H5P server is hosted on our Libre Studio. If you go to studio.libretext.org, you can see those things right now, and I will show it to you momentarily. The LibreNet is our consortium that's designed in order to maintain sustainability of our LibreText. Kansas State University is a member of our LibreNet. So you're going to see a few K-State branded aspects in terms of when I start going through websites momentarily. But the aspect of what we're trying to do is to build a system that's decentralized, but has a few additional benefits of the centralization that we have control. The decentralized approach makes it so that when people are building projects on one campus, they can then capitalize on what other people are building on another campus in an effective manner, standardized and able to be shared. And that uses the common and conductor technology that's out there. So that was meant to be an overview. Let me end with what I started, which is our mission statement. We're implementing a community-built OER platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that is comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. I should skip over that. And then with that, I'm going to end this sort of formal presentation and then transition into going through the technologies that you guys have available. Does anyone have any questions before we actually go through that?
I have a question. I don't know if this is the right time to ask it, but will you go over at some point? I'm looking at some of the stuff on LibreText right now. One of the books. How do I edit that? If I found a section or a book that I wanted to kind of change the.
We need to give you an account.
Possible even.
What was that?
I think we lost you. Could you try to repeat your question again?
Yeah, I'm looking at something from LibreText, like a book. How do I edit parts of that if I want to change the language or if I want to add some stuff? Or
I'm going to go over that, but the first thing
Okay.
is you need to get an account in order to do that. So when we started this project, it was an open project where anyone can get an account that would be editable and they're able to contribute to the community. And that was great. But just like why we have that code of conduct at the start of this presentation, I had people who violated our community. And I started to get things like erectile dysfunction ads put onto our site and a handful of other things. And then about 5-7 years ago, it became clear that we couldn't operate like that. So we had to close things off where we give our accounts freely to people who requested it and had the reason in order to access it, because we just couldn't handle the load of people who were abusing our site. So I'm willing to spend a few minutes here in order to go through set you guys up with some accounts on respective libraries. But I need you to write in the, because I didn't have an email address for everyone, so I couldn't send an email out to you before this meeting. But if you put into the chat am I allowed to ask people to put their email addresses in the chat? Brenda, is that an issue?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Are you just copying their emails to add them into the account? Can they email you directly, and that way you have their?
They can, but it's going to be delayed. So
so is that like
yeah.
for the session right now?
Yeah, I'm trying to say that I can set things up right now for the people who actually want accounts. Otherwise, I can step through and show what happens when you get the account.
Yeah, I would say it's fine because it's voluntary.
Yeah.
So anybody that would like to do what you're asking can by all means put their email in the chat, and then those that don't want to, don't put their email in the chat.
Or they can go to the site and like you said,
yeah,
create an
okay.
account, because I know that you
Okay,
want to probably show
or you could send it to me personally. It doesn't matter. I see it right here. But the key point is I need to know which library you want, because I don't have a single license across a single account across all the libraries.
So I see a lot of people, I see some people putting it in the chat, if
Yes.
you want to take a look. And that way, at least, give a couple of people accounts so you can at least show the other people what you want to show as you're doing that activity.
And I'm willing to do that as soon as I get one. So Todd actually has something here. So we're going to take a 5-minute break or something like that while I set these things up. You'll also notice that I posted some things in here in terms of other accounts that you have available. Some of them are freely available, some are freely viewable. Other things like the homework system requires a little bit more capabilities in order to set this thing up. So let me move this over here. You don't need to see. But I will recommend that you go to this K-State commons.libretexts.org. This is the Commons site that I'm going to be going through and showing you how you can use it to organize building of books. And if you go to this thing, if you go to Login Conductor, you can get your own free account in order to come in. It's freely available. If you want to step through what I'm going to be showing you, we can do that. Otherwise, please bear with me while I set this thing up. Let me. Do you guys have accounts that are either Microsoft enabled or Google enabled? Is that an assumption that I should have?
Yeah, this is Todd again. Yeah, ours is Highland's stuff is Microsoft Office Online.
Okay, I'm going to set this thing up so you can log in through your campus credentials. So Todd, your account is set up. Lee, I'm working on here.
Yeah, Pitt State is also Office.
Okay. Lee, I'm going to put you on humanities because you didn't. I didn't see which one you wanted there. And you should be getting some emails. Maybe not because of the credentials I'll do in here.
Where's your data science textbooks?
Data science.
Is that in engineering?
It's a good question. I'm not sure how many of those things we have. Some of them are distributed in engineering, some are in math. If it's true data science, it's probably in one of those two. Lee, you already have an account on the humanities library.
Computer science is underneath the engineering.
Do you say computer science or data science?
Data science.
Yeah, data science is a little different. But I would check engineering. I'm unfortunately unable to.
Yeah, I looked at engineering, but I didn't see anything specific to data science. I was seeing all the different other fields.
Let me see here. So if you go to the Commons, if you do a search on commons.libretexts.org, it's the generic one. There are two of them that have data in the title. That's not comprehensive. There's no doubt other things there. I just need to check it out here. So Gloria, you want to go in humanities? That's great. Again, I'm sorry for this delay, but since I didn't have your email addresses, I couldn't send out a request to you guys. Okay, basic user. Okay, Gloria, you're in. Roxana, what library do you want to be in?
It doesn't matter. Sociology.
Okay, then I'll put you in social sciences. Normally I would make a generic account and then hand that out to everybody, but I do want you to be able to do more than just a generic account here. Okay, Todd, I have you. Laurel, what library would you like to be in? Are you still there, Laurel? Looks like you are here, but you may have stepped away. How about Daryl?
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. A basic user or social sciences is fine.
Okay,
I just kind of want to experiment.
I'm going to give you social sciences.
Perfect. Thank
So we have a single sign-on, but we haven't completed it to the level that we want it to be. In your account, will give you access to a sandbox that you can play in, but it doesn't give you access to the rest of the library because we want to, again, maintain the integrity of things. Daryl, do you have a?
Yes, engineering, technology, if you have it.
We have engineering. We also have workforce that has some CIS-like stuff on it. I'm not sure.
Workforce might be interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
That's probably closer.
Okay. Workforce is a very hands-on, a catch-all for lots of these things. I didn't spell workforce properly. I don't know why.
And I am in technology and workforce learning, so.
There you go. Okay. Laurel, I think I got you. Roxanne, Todd, Lee, Gloria, Laurel, Lee, Brenda, you want to be in nursing, so that's in medicine.
Yes, that'll be great. Yeah, I work at the medical center, so that'll be great with medicine and the other.
Yeah, we're
companies.
probably going to rename this to health instead of medicine, but I just haven't gotten around to doing it because it's a little bit better name.
Yeah, definitely more inclusive for sure.
Yeah. External, basic. Okay. Gloria,
yeah, is it possible to add me to social science as well? Because I have a business group of things that.
That's fine. Who's talking?
Gloria.
Okay. Not a problem. Europe and Canada?
No, I'm from South Africa.
You have an Ottawa email.
Ottawa, Kansas.
Oh, there's an Ottawa, Kansas? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, that should be everything. So if you go to your site, there's a two-step process. So let me go to something where I'm not logged in. So let's say you go to Workforce. You should have gotten emails that your accounts are set up, but it won't have any passwords. So this is what a general account is set up. In most of the times, we have 3 entries here: campus bookshelves, which are customized areas where you keep your books for your campus; centralized bookshelves, which are curated by the community; and then we have a learning objects area, but we don't have it for the workforce because we haven't built it yet. I set you guys all up in order to operate on a 2-step process. Hopefully I didn't make a mistake. in order to log into your respective aspect. So step number one is you click on single sign-on. So ignore this username and password. Hopefully that addresses Todd's issue. And you click on single sign-on, and up pops the option in order to Microsoft or Google enable. So you pick the one that ascribes to your campus. So I'm going to log in with my Gmail account because that's obviously Google. So Delmar Larson at Gmail. This is not connected to an account, but it doesn't mean I can't log in. I don't know what my password is. Okay, that's I don't know what my password. Is that one of them? No. Okay, this is a problem when I. Okay, let me log out. Okay, so this is the procedure that we do again. You click on single sign-on for your account. You log in here. This way now Chrome will remember it. Now it remembers everything. So I'm going to use, for example, my Gmail account. It's not a it gets me in, and this line here turns blue. Now this is the same procedure that we use with students, because it gives us the ability to track students if you want to track them. You don't have to for those learning analytics infrastructure. Same sort of things that would come with the learning management system. The second step is to then go into instructor mode. And if I did things right, you're going to go into instructor mode. So if I didn't set up an account for you, then you're only able to stay at this first level. So if you're into computer science, that's basically saying this is authentication and this is authorization, meaning that we haven't given you authorization, but we do know who you are. And this is this sort of infrastructure is quite painful to dig through. So I don't want to go into too much detail. I just want to make sure that you guys can get in using your local accounts. That
Quick question. This
Yes.
is Brenda, and I just tried doing that with my KUMC, and I wonder if there are some institutions that are very strict with the setting, because I know that we use Microsoft Office, and when I tried to log in and create it, it said that I needed to notify my administrator. So I wonder if some institutions.
Some campuses, Microsoft, it can be a little bit more annoying for doing it. If you have a Google enabled account also, let me phrase that. If your campus is also a Google enabled account, then use that federated authentication infrastructure. And if you can't, so let me ask you, is that the case?
Yeah, it's an yeah. It doesn't. No, I don't have any Google. We don't use Google.
Okay. Let me. I'm going to switch you over to local Actually, let me phrase it. I'm going to switch you to local, so you just log in directly. So it's basically I'm not going to rely on. You were medicine, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. It's interesting. I always have to go through that extra layer of
administration. It happens every once in a while, but not much. And it requires us finding out, what the details are off of it. Microsoft is a little bit more flaky than Google when it comes to these things. And then we can also, if we have arrangement with your campus, hook it up in order to do that.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to see if anybody else.
Okay, but again, now you're going to be logging in the direct way. But let me. Okay. And I'm going to give you an account, a password, which you can change. Externally, it looks like it's fine. Save, and where are you? You're right there. And this is your generic password. So if you go to the medicine library. I just cleaned my caches out so it doesn't remember me. You log in differently. You log in directly here using your, stop that. I don't, okay, now it's, don't. Okay, so it seems to remember me through my UC Davis. when it happens when you have, it feels like 1,000 email addresses. You put your email address here, which is your username, and that password I paste there, and it will go in. And then you don't need to worry about whatever your campus says, because we're not going through your campus authentication.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank
Yeah,
you
no
so
worries.
much.
Is everyone cool or cool enough? If you have any problems, feel free to send me an email, delmar@libretext.org or info@libretext.org. A different person will access that, and probably someone who's going to be faster than me. But anyways, so while I have medicine, I'll open this thing up. So you have the, you're not going to see these other things. This is, you're only going to see these things right here. And these are just meant for development purposes. This is our construct where we are building things across our site. Everyone has a sandbox, and you can access your sandbox right underneath your name here. So the sandbox is the only area that you have the ability in order to edit it. And you can edit quite freely in there, and no one will care. So go for it, as long as you don't put copyrighted material, so you're not infringing on legal issues. We don't mind off of that. But before we actually go into these details, I want to go into the commons and conductor system. So the commons and conductor system, and the reason it has two names is because it's a bimodal technology. And so every member of our LibreNet gets their own branded commons and conductor system. So this is K-State's system, and the front end is meant to be an interface. Let me renew this. An interface to the books that they have created. So it's basically a commons for that campus or for a system if they are part of it. So these are the 3 books that they have constructed that they are then using for their respective campuses. They've customized, built them, and then are using them effectively. This provides a simple way in order to make it so stockholders are able to quickly look at the books that are available on your campus. That includes whether they're faculty, student, administrators, regents, benefactors, etc., and then identify them off of here. So you go to any of these things. And let me mention this first. The core commons of the technology is the LibreCommons, and that is the one that covers everything. So this is it, and the front end is meant to show this. So in this case here, it's showing 1,000 books that you're then able to parse through. Now, we don't recommend parsing through. You can do a search off of here. For example, if you do a search for calculus, it then will do and find the 21 books that are connected to calculus or related to calculus that you're able to cut through. And you can do that here in your local commons, but you can also do an advanced search in order to be able to identify which library, author, affiliation, license, publisher, subject, etc., in order to do that. And I encourage you to play with that if you'd like. That's the front end. I would mention that any of these books that's out there, for example, I don't know why I'm picking one here. So here's one of the books that's out there. This is Grand Valley State Universities. This is Boaken's Active Calculus. It's a book that I actually like, and such. Hold on one second here. Gloria, you're saying you're getting an error. Do you know what the error is? Feel free to chime in when you're able to get access to your microphone. So what you'll notice here is that this is meant to be sort of a front end for your book. It gives a summary, it gets a table of contents, and this is the real-time version of it. You can go to any page that you want here. So if you want to go to integration by parts, you can go directly to that page. It's one of multiple table of contents that are available out there, but it's the one that you can set in. Here's the book dealing with integration by parts. We will have the ability to do a search through table of contents and summaries and other things like that very soon. Gloria, you're saying that your sign-in has failed. Did you press the single sign-on button?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's necessary in order to sign in.
The single sign-on button?
The little button that says SSO.
Oh, is it so? Okay,
yeah.
let me try that.
Yeah, that's how I
Thank
set things.
you.
Yeah. And then you press instructor mode after that.
Okay.
Was there a? Yeah, I have a feeling that you went direct to local authorization. So anyways, as I was saying, this is a powerful mechanism to show these things. We have an option here in order to provide an adoption report. So that it provides a centralized mechanism in order to keep track of the adoptions for a specific book or on a specific campus. And this is useful for OER programs on the campus in order to be able to organize these things and keep it available. And I could show it to you off of that. In addition to that, you have the ability in order to identify all the export options that you may want to be able to get in. And there are a few additional features that are connected to here that I wanted to showcase. Ethan, are you able to run a license map on this thing since you're here?
Sure, give me just a second.
Okay, I'm going to paste this right here, and you can see it in the chat. And he'll tweak this thing. And do you know why the review is not on here?
There may have been an issue creating a project for that. I can look into that.
If you tell me a different project that's set up here, I can showcase that.
Okay, sure.
I just grabbed one randomly. So as I mentioned before, we have not showcased this technology yet. So you guys are the very first people that we've showcased outside of our project up here. So, we're going to do this in Open Ed Week in 3 weeks when a few of these other bugs are going to be available. But this technology, we've switched over. All our teams are working with it, and we have about 400 projects and about 200 people who are actively working on these things. Anyways, this is the front end off of it. It's pretty straightforward. You can then look at libraries. You can then look at collections that are partners that we have, and then you have homework collections, so collections that are part of the adapt system that I showed momentarily. So you can say, okay, if you want to pick up a French book, these are the units for that French book, and if you want to go into the book itself, you need, or go into the questions, you need to log into adapt. Anyways, what I want to focus more on is not the front end, which is what we call the commons. It's the back end that we call the conductor. So when you log in with your free account via login to conductor, and I'm going to log in to the main one, just because I have it in my my cache, my cookies. You get this interface. Now yours is not going to look as busy as mine because your account is brand new. But the intent of the conductor is to be a project organization tool. Now there are lots of project organization tools out there, like Trello and that's all I can think of off the top of my head, but there are loads of them out there, and many people get involved in building these tools because when they're adopted at the enterprise level, they cost a lot of money. And this one here is freely available for everyone in the community. You can use it. However, if you build your book on the LibreTexts site, you have a lot more features that are useful. So I do want to mention this thing, going back to what Ethan said here, and this I'm very excited about, and we're going to be talking about this more in the upcoming month. The guiding principle that we have with books is that we have a single license associated with the book oftentimes. So for example, this Mohawk Valley Community College book that's electrical circuit analysis has a CC by NC Share Like 3.0 license. And it has a table of contents and things like that. But what we've started to do is something a little bit more powerful. We started to recognize that we want to be able to provide a mechanism in order to reflect remixes that come from different sources that have different licenses. And this is quite common. So what you have a whole lot of Lego blocks in order to build things together. Each Lego block may be a different color. They can play well together or not well together in order to be able to do that. If you make a remix, that term of remix is used, the formal definition that Creative Commons uses for remix means that you give a single license for everything that's on the content. But I would argue, for example, that if you have a single picture that's a different license than the text on the page, you can't give the same license on that page. Because when you say the license on a page is something, it gives the impression that everything that's on there has it is set there. So Ethan set this thing up for this book, this introductory chemistry book. This is CK12, isn't it? I think this has a lot of CK12 stuff in it, by the way. We haven't modeled it. So this it has a reflection that says that this book here, when we go through this licensing matrix, it will show you that we have of 167 pages are unclassified, which we haven't addressed or are mixed. 10 are this license, 8 are that license, 3 are this license, and 2 are this license. This reflects better the nature of the book than giving it a single license, which is incorrect, or giving it a license and say all rights reserved, or not all rights reserved, but unless otherwise noted off of here. And this is a technology that we've been focusing on a bit the last few months in order to be able to provide the opportunity in order to better reflect the nature of the licensing. And more importantly, when you do it in this way, you don't have to worry about trying to make licenses work well together. In other words, you're making what's called a collection, and you're not trying to brand everything under a single license. You're trying to say this book has lots of licenses, and some of them are non-commercial, so that means you can't sell the book, and that's a limitation. But otherwise, you can use the book as you want, because the licenses are very similar, and as long as we satisfy attribution requirements and things like that, it's available. I can talk about this quite a lot. We're very excited about this prospect, this aspect off of there, but I want to go into the finer details of the conductor. So when you go to the conductor, you can go to each one of the projects that's in the commons is a project that's been compiled, which means it's been signified, it's at the level of distribution. But you can also make each of those books has a project page in the conductor, the back end. That page is a mechanism in order to store all the discussions and other things associated with that project. But you can also build pages in the conductor directly to begin with in order to construct your book. So let me show this. This right here is a few details of powers that you have when you're we have a few advanced features. For example, I can then look at the control panel. I can see the people who have who've submitted adoption reports. So now I'm able to take this information and make reports out as necessary. We have a few additional things like homework management, such as that. I don't want to go into that in detail. I want to actually focus more on projects. And I want to pick a project that is active here. So this is a healthcare Spanish project for OER, for OER, for ASCCC, Academic Senate of the California Community College System. And it is a project, it keeps everything together for the team. So this is a team that has a handful of people that are all part of the team. And the idea is to keep it centralized. We have some properties associated with the project. We have some source material if it's necessary, some notes, some organization of how they actually want to go about doing these things. And then we have a discussion thread. So you can have general discussion threads for everybody. So you can actually communicate and then everybody gets it. The reason that we did this is that inboxes are becoming more and more difficult these days in order to keep track of. This keeps a consistent record of communication associated with different projects. Then we have the ability in order to make tasks. So we can create tasks. In this case here, they're chapters in the book that they're creating, assign people to those tasks, and then they can start to build from those tasks as necessary. They have their own discussion thread. This one here has some subtasks off of here, and it provides a centralized mechanism in order to build. And more importantly, for large projects, this is effective distribution or effective parallel construction efforts. So you can build these things as needed without having to micromanage large projects that are moving things forward. A few additional things I have here. So you can manage your team. You can add people to your team, but they need to have an account in order to come in. We have a timeline that reflects those tasks that will give it shown in a Gantt plot or a calendar view. So you can have deadlines if you're a liaison, i.e. that you're part of a team campus OER program that you're facilitating these people in order to say, I want this deadline to be done here and this one to be done there. We have a peer review infrastructure, which is one of the third processes so one of three three mechanisms that we use for success in building a OER book. One is construction, one is review, and one is accessibility. They're reflected here. So in this case here, there's been no review process, and there's been no accessibility review off of it. But in this case here, we can construct a new review, provide it available, submit it. You can hand these things out to people in order to review books by just giving them a URL and say, please review this, and off it goes. The other thing that's particularly interesting is accessibility. And this is still going to be under development, but this is really cool. Our accessibility team is led by a professional external consultant who, in reviewing any OER book, has 81 criteria that he uses in order to be able to dictate whether the book addresses ADA and WCAG 2.1, AA or AAA requirements. This is typically a painful process requiring lots of effort in order to do, because you need to apply these criteria to every single page in your OER book. Yeah. And we didn't want to just have some simple little check marks in order to be able to, we wanted to have something very powerful. So these 81 entries will be put down here. This is a simplified version of that. And when you create your book, you can grab it from the LibreTexts, and it will grab all the table of contents, every page here. And then when you review something, you can come in and say, you review that, you can click that, review that, click that, click that, and click that. And what this becomes is a permanent accessibility compliance review for that book. So you can always go back to your book and say, what is the state of accessibility? Because if you have 100 book pages, you have 81 criteria, you have 810 of these entries that need to be done. And no book that I've ever seen it is able to check mark every single one of these things. But we want to be able to provide a mechanism in order to facilitate that procedure that's out there. More importantly, than being able to preserve this for any book. And that's a very detailed fashion. This page has this thing connected to it. These things, these criteria will be cut into 3 tables. A table that requires a human to review, a table that you can use a computer to review, and a table that's connected to the technology, the LibreTexts project technology, which is part of the ACR, the Accessibility Compliance Review, but it's not something that's specific to the individual book. That one there we handle on our side. The technology-enabled accessibility is handled by bots that we have running on it. For example, are all alt text under 150 characters, which we use for accessibility purposes. JAWS doesn't recognize extended alt text. And that right there, I can use a computer in order to be able to do that. However, I can't use a computer to be able to identify, do the images have meaningful alt text? But the key point here is to make it as easy as possible for people to do accessibility, preserve that record, and then move forward with this as effectively, efficiently as possible. And that is what this aspect of the conductor does. And we're very excited about this because no one does anything like this. And it's so super detailed that I know it can be scary, but it's the most accurate thing that we can do out there. Because the compliance review matrix, the ACRs that our accessibility person does, essentially is making these tables up and telling you that these are, this table, this page here has this problem, this page has this problem, and then you're moving off of it. So, like I said, this is all freely available, but when you build your book on the LibreTexts, it will automatically populate that accessibility matrix from the table of contents that we have. Otherwise, if you were to build this on Pressbooks or something like that, you would have to manually add it together because it's not connected to Pressbooks API and such. So I encourage you to play around with that. There are going to be more features that'll be coming around the block as we get this thing going, but we're very excited in order to do that. I will mention one thing. This is an example of a project that we're doing in order to build solutions for OpenStack's chemistry questions. because OpenStax does not have those openly licensed, and also we want to improve on what they have constructed. So I hired half of my general chemistry class this term, and they're writing the solutions to these problems. These are all the chapters for the OpenStax questions, and I basically have them all operating in parallel. They can provide their discussions here for how they're moving forward. That they're really new. This is just a couple days old, and it's very effective in order to be able to do these large-scale, open pedagogy-based procedures. And we are strong on open pedagogy because we've always been a student-driven project, even though we also have lots of faculty that are on it too. And I have no problem discussing these things in detail. Feel free to contact me off of that. So that was a larger introduction, but it's a new technology that we're very thrilled in order to be able to showcase. Does anyone have any questions regarding that before I transition into other things? Was that straightforward to you guys? I hope that you guys can see the utility of this, because we switched all our construction efforts into the conductor, and it's made things 5 to 10 times easier, better for us than before, the way that we handled them.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask him any questions directly, or put it in the chat for sure.
Well, like I said, I'm going to be talking about this a lot over the upcoming months, and we're very excited. And Ethan Turner, who's on here, is the student that built this technology. It's freely available. It's on GitHub. You can grab it and run yourselves. But like I said, it's also freely available accounts on here, so there's almost no reason for you to run it yourself. And obviously, we update the technology as we build it. In contrast, and GitHub would do it too, but they need it to run everything. So anyways, let me skip over that. Do we know when this meeting ends? Is it at the bottom of the hour, or earlier or later?
This session is going to, we have the time for 3:40.
Okay.
So you can definitely have that time, or
okay, so let's just get the feeling for editing. So if you go to your page and you go to your sandbox that's underneath your name here, and I have lots of junk because the sandbox has lots of junk, and yours will be empty. You can if this page settings is extended, you can close it so it doesn't get in the way. And the idea here is that each page is an entry in the database. And we just need to be able to tie them together as a collection, which constitutes the book. So your pages will be empty. Actually, this is not really going to be good, because it's going to be lots, because you're going to see on my site lots of sandboxes, because I can see everyone's sandboxes. But you're going to have a few things like your training tutorials. This is the LibreFest, which is our now annual meetings. And then you'll have your name written down here, and in your name, you click on your sandbox, and it will be completely empty, just like this one. So I will consider this to be my empty one, and I don't know, this person hasn't done anything in the sandbox. So the first thing I want to do is to create a page. So I'm going to go under New, and I'm just going to create a new book. Now, books we have, if they're canonical structure, and it doesn't have to always be canonical structure, is a book, chapter, section, sometimes called page. Book, chapter, section. So in this case here, I'm creating a book, so I'm going to just call it My Pretty Book, and I press save. And there is a pretty book. It gives a little bit of an indicator that says that it's a new book, that's a new page is created. You delete those, they're almost important, and it's completely empty. So now this is a page, it's the top level of the book. And any page that I have editing rights, I will have a little button here that says edit. Okay. And I want to point this out there. Your bar here needs to be black when you have editing rights. If it's blue or gray, you don't have editing rights. So that's why you don't have the edit button that comes up. So if you press the edit button, it will then edit this page. and such. So right now I have a little bit of script here, and this script is basically code that says, show me everything below this page, because I want it to be a table of contents. Ignore it. It doesn't matter. I can then, through this WYSIWYG, what you see is what you interface, I can say, I see the cat on the hat in the mat, on the mat. Just like you would edit in a variety of different ways on the internet. And this is just simple WYSIWYG approach. If you look at the HTML, which if you're uncomfortable with HTML, you can close your eyes. It's not too big of a deal. You don't need to access it. And this is what the true code looks like. And that's the same thing if it's actually on Word. You just don't ever see the true code. You can then save the page, and it saves it to the database. Now, the one thing to emphasize here is that every single time you save it, it's permanently saved in our database. So the point is, you will never lose anything. So feel free to write. And if you don't like something, you can go back to a previous version of your page and revert it. Straightforward. So if I edit this page again, here we go. And now I can do a variety of other things. Most of these buttons should look similar to you, or familiar to you at least, because they're the same sort of buttons that you see in Google Docs or in Word, or even in your learning management system. For example, I can highlight cat. Let me double click on cat, and I can make it bold. I can make this italicized. I can make this thing underline. I can change color, although to be honest, I would like to get rid of that. You can change highlighting, that's there. And all these things that you have and how to do this thing is written in our construction guide. And you can access the construction guide on any of your libraries under developers. The developer side panel only comes up when you log in. If you're anonymous, when this is not black, this goes away. So if you click on that, you then have your construction guide right here that you're able to either go through your construction guide if you want, or you can even go directly to your construction guide right here. And this is the guide. And you can even get this printed up for like $8 or so from Lulu Express that you can buy right here. Along that same lines, since I'm kind of jumping around, if you compile these things, they then go into a bookstore that will then go automatically to Lulu Express, and this is a $10 book if you want to get it, plus shipping, depending upon how fast you want it to get it. These things have been creeping up over the last handful of months, as you would expect because of inflation, but it gets directly from the publisher, from the printer. Anyways, I digress. Getting back to editing. We have a few additional features here that you can get to. Most of these are pretty straightforward. There's a few additional buttons here that's associated with the visual technologies, which I'm not going to have time in order to go to because I want to showcase the remixer and showcase a little bit of the homework system before the end of this meeting. But you can play around here and go through the construction guide, and you can do lots of stuff. You can also copy and paste things from external, obviously, just like it were a Word document. The only thing is that you need to make sure that you do it legally, because if I were to save this, this would be illegal because this is all rights reserved and I'm violating these things. Anyways, I digress. I want to remix a book. So let's build a remix. So we're going to use the remixer. The remixer is found under tools. So you can actually access the remixer when you're not logged in. However, you're not going to be able to save the remix that you built because you don't have saving capabilities. But everyone here, I think, has a black bar here, so you have editing rights. So we're going to pick tools, and you see the OER remixer. You'll see a handful of other things, including the Libre Commons that I showed you before, and getting citations and attributions and a few other things there. But I just want to focus on the remixer right now. And it will go to the page that's the remixer for your platform. Now, your remixer is going to look slightly different because you're not going to have this bar right here. And it's just because I'm logged in as myself, which is a more advanced account than what you have, but don't worry about that. Just ignore that for now, please. So this is the remixer, and the concept of the remixer is that your remixer can be in one of two modes. It could be new remix mode, which means it creates a new remix, or it edits an existing remix. So let's just create a new remix. This right here loads from previous session. That means if your computer crashed, for example, it would check to see what's stored in your cookies and bring it back here so that you can then do that. And I will go over this in a moment, but I just want to focus down here because this is where the gritty aspects are in. On the left side, the left panel, that is a view into the half a million pages that you have access to. If you click on this button right here, you can see all the libraries there. But it goes to social sciences because that's the library that I happened to be in when I was doing this. Over here is the book that I'm creating. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't exist before, and it just gives some default here. If I don't like this thing, I can delete it and use it. Right now, it comes with 5 empty chapters, a front matter and a back matter. And I could say, I don't like this, and this. Okay. This does not exist on the site or anything, but when you save this, it will save it to your sandbox. And it will save it to your sandbox irrespective of who you are. Always the new remix will be saved to your sandbox. Then you move it out of your sandbox if you have permission, or you request us, the development team, in order to move it out of your sandbox in order to put it into a campus bookshelf, or if you have original content, into the centralized bookshelf so everyone can capitalize on. Although you can remix from anyone, any library. So this is the layout with a few additional features off of here. This is a little bit of a an edit bar, which has the ability to make a new page, to do page properties, and to delete pages. This is forward and back. This is undo and redo. And then save to server means that it then no longer is saved on your computer. It then goes on to our server. Now, the key point here is from the remixer is to be able to remix, hence the term remixer. So you want to be able to build a book. So let's build a book. I think, Gloria, you're on social sciences, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, what field are you in?
Business sometimes. So it just depends. Actually, I'm more in humanities, so you can say I'm in English.
Okay. We can do that. I just let me start remixing on our library without going to the other libraries. It's not that big of a deal, but I just want to do it on ours to begin with. So let's say when you log in, you're not going to see under construction, and you're not going to see adapt nodes. And you may not see sandboxes because I think that's something that we need to fix next quarter if you don't see sandboxes. But you'll see these 3 things. Campus bookshelves are focused on specific campuses that have their own customized books. If they're part of the LibreNet, they have a commons, but we provide this to anybody that's out there. But if any campus has more than 5 books, then we ask them to be part of the LibreNet consortium. Other than that, then there's no difference between a consortium member or a non-consortium member that's out there. So, for example, let's say I took Long Beach City College, and they have 2 books that are there. This would be the same thing if I were to do a search through the bookshelves, which is our central bookshelves, and they're organized by structure, while the campus bookshelves are organized by campus. So anyways, while I have this open, I'll do it. Let's say we're making an economics book. And here's a set of economics books. Now, the key point behind remixing is that you need to have a remixing game plan. We call that a remixing map, which gives you, and it can be constructed in a variety of different formats. So this is an example of a remixing map that you can get an Excel sheet. And you're basically saying, I want this page on our site to be organized on this page in your book. It's just a one-to-one correspondence because the remixer is designed in order to remix. It's not designed necessarily, although you can do it in order to parse through the book and find out which page you want to go about doing that. You can do that yourselves by just going through the library that's there. anyways, so we're in economics, and let's say I want my book that's going to be an economics book. So my econ book. It's spelled econ, right? And spell book, right? And I'm going to say I want chapter 1 of Principles of Macroeconomics. I think this is probably a flat world knowledge book. I can just drag this over. I can put it there, and it pops it in here. Now don't worry about the fact that it's below the back matter, because this will always be in the back. And it brings in all the chapters that are all the sections here that's connected. I can then grab 2. I can bring it down here, or I can put it up here, and it brings it down here. And I can do that on any book. So let's say I now want let's say I want human development, lifespan development, and I want chapter 6 put into here. It's a very peculiar book, but it's still a book that comes in here. Now I brought these things over. Now I want to say I want to delete this book right here, this section right here. I could just delete that. What did I I'm not sure what I guess I deleted the back matter. Yeah, whatever. Let me go back. I'm not sure why I deleted this thing, and it goes down off of that. I can sit here and I can rearrange them and organize them in the way that I want them to be. And what you'll notice here is, because I have this thing called auto number on, as I move it around, it changes the numbers accordingly. So let's say this is 2.2 review. I can move it up here, and now it became 2.1. So it means you don't need to keep track of the numbering as you put these things over, because what used to be chapter 6 is now chapter 3, and all the sections are combining to here. The other thing in order to note is, if we have the technology set up on the pages properly, which is a slow process, but we're doing it, when you change the title number, it will then change the figure number, the equation numbers, and table numbers inside the page accordingly. The key point here is to make it as easy as possible in order to remix your book using these Lego blocks that you're coming together. Is it going to be perfect? No, because you typically want to do some editing on the pages, but it will get you as close as we can with the existing repository that we have available. And as our corpus grows, it becomes easier and easier to build a book that you exactly want from base principles. Okay, so let me delete that one, because I just want this thing to do that. I now make this book up that has 2 chapters. I'm going to save it. I save to the server. It goes through a 2-step process. The first one is to give you an overview. It says, okay, before we're going to save, it's going to make 3 pages that are blank pages. You can even look what pages that they're blank, which is the top page, the back matter, and the front matter. You can say, well, 13 pages will be copy transcluded. Don't worry about that. It basically means it'll come over from the original content. If I have time, I'll go back into that, but I don't think I have much time. And then you save to the server. And this is now when it creates this book and brings over those pages into the book that will then be in my sandbox. Now, this will take just a few seconds. And it's at this point that it exists on our server. Otherwise, it just exists in my head and on my personal computer that's there. It's completed it. I can click this button here. And now I go to the book. And here is this book, which is, again, only a 2-section book. That's really quite a bizarre book that's there. Front matter, back matter. You can go to the table of contents, and you can see them down here as you want in order to do that. You have the ability to switch to remix mode, which basically is equivalent to saying you want to load in a book. So in this case here, I'm going to load in not my pretty book, because that's what I was. I'm going to pull up the book that I just made. This right here tells you when I opened up the remixer. This takes a little bit of time because we have a lot of users. And so what did I call this thing? My econ book. I load that up. And here's the book, but now I'm in remix mode, which basically means I have the ability to edit these things. So if I come in and I delete this section right here, That page already exists. Before it didn't exist, so it didn't matter. But now that it exists, it's telling me what it's going to do when I save it. It's going to delete that by making it red. It's going to change the titles of these things, which makes it orange. Or alternatively, I can make a new page, which will be green. So it provides a mechanism to constantly cycle through in order to be able to do this. So you don't, which is how we encourage people to do this instead of having to try to build it all from scratch to begin with. So if I were to save this, it would then process that. It gives me an overview. It says, well, one page is deleted, 2 pages will be renamed, 1 page is added. And this will take a little bit less time because it has less changes that's on there. So Gloria has a question about LTI I'll get to in just 1 second. But this is the basic principles off of here. You start to bring things over, but I do want to bring one thing up, which I told you to ignore, which is this thing called transclusion. Now, when people remix from books, the vast majority of the time, they are not interested in editing every single page on the book that they bring in. They want it quickly, for example, maybe one reason in order to do that, or they're quite fine with the way the book is. We have the belief that if the content on the page is the same as the original one, let me rephrase that. If you don't want to edit this page on your book, then why copy the content over? And that's what we did here. What we did is we mirrored the content from the original source onto here. And this is a process called transclusion. You are probably familiar with transclusion by different names. If you use a Macintosh, it's called an alias. If you use a PC, it's called a shortcut. If you use a Unix box, it's called a symbolic link. The idea behind it is that what looks like it's one thing is really stored somewhere else. And that concept happens here. So it's dictated by this little icon here that says the content here looks like it's there. And actually, this needs to be updated. It looks like it's stored here, but if I were to edit this page, it's not. It's just basically a box of code that says it's really reused, and this is the content of where it came from. It looks the same, but when I edit it, it's actually stored somewhere else. So now it's piggybacked on 2 different sites. It's because they use the same content in different books. So here you edit it. I'm sorry to give you a daisy chain. And here is the content that is distributed off here. And I can come here and edit this thing. And if I edit this thing, like I'm erasing these lines here, there's some rendering here that I want to do. And I'm doing this just so you can see a bit here. So this is a page captioning. So I did a little bit of editing there. Delete that, I don't need that anymore. And now you're going to see that that was reflected there. Something's happening here. This is not working right. This thing here should reflect this off of here. We have a little bit of a bug that we noticed last week, and we're trying to figure it out, why it doesn't automatically come in like that. The point off of that is not just that we do this to save space, but we do this for curation efforts. Because if I come in and I improve this page, then everyone who copies it, who has it in their book, gets the benefit of the upgrade. And that right there is where a centralized curation utility is really at its best, instead of having things fragmented on a variety of different sites that are unable to couple these things together. There are additional technologies that we're coming into that will give you versioning capabilities, so you can look at people who have forked content, which means they have 2 different copies of that. You can compare them and then take the benefits of that. I want to transition quickly to the homework system because we've been spending a lot of time focusing on that in the last couple of years. But I will mention Gloria's question. If you have a book and you want to, the question is, so right now we don't use LTI deep linking to move the book into learning management systems. We have common cartridge imports. So you download the the thin common cartridge file and you upload it to your respective learning management system. We're working on the LTI deep linking in order to be able to do that. We're just not there yet. We've been using LTI extensively for our homework system, which I'm transitioning to. And that's, for example, where Brian Lynchfield has been using it for the last year for integrating his intermediate nutrition courses into Canvas that's there. Laura asks, what if the original author does not want the updated changes? So the content stored by the original author's book. So if you make a book, it's stored in your campus bookshelf. So this is a centralized bookshelf. So it's community built, curated by the LibreTexts development team. And everything that's on here is openly licensed, which means that we have the power, the permission in order to update it. But if you build your own book and you don't want to be part of that constant updating and you don't trust us in order to do that, you can fork all the content, which means that you uncouple it and no one edits your book because you have permissioning in order to only give you and the development team access to edit your book. So you can preserve the integrity of your book without having to participate in this updating. And it's your preference in terms of what you want to do for that. Okay. In the last few minutes, I want to talk about ADAPT. Now, remember I said that ADAPT is the technology that sits upon several different technologies. One is the H5P repository that we call the LibreStudio. And the LibreStudio, okay, looks like this when you log in. And right now, it shows you a catalog of about 7,000 H5P problems. Now, these are problems that you can use through ADAPT for summative use, or you can use for formative use if you just want to download them and integrate them into whatever technologies you have. You can embed these into your textbook directly as either summative, meaning that we have a grade book behind it, or formative, that you can just basically have people students do the exercises and benefit from them. So if you're unfamiliar with H5P, then I encourage you to take this around. This is an example of this. So this is a multiple choice question dealing with mixing some things together and then basically asking which one of these things here. H5P has some limitations. The other technologies we use are more algorithmic, which gives you the ability in order to enter in numbers with a little bit more capabilities than what H5P does. But H5P, with all its utility, has two issues that I want to bring up, and then I'll transition. One is that H5P has some limitations in terms of security. So H5P technology, unless you pay Jubal, the company that made it, to port it into your learning management system. So if you use it for our system, you use it through Pressbook system or other systems, is insecure, which means that you can hack into it in order to be able to find it. For example, the easiest thing you can do is before giving a question, in order to find the answer, if you unplug the internet, press the question and then get the answers and then plug in your internet, you can then get all the answers and plug it in. So it should only be used in formative or low stakes summative, but it should never be used for an exam. And it's something that we need to pay very careful attention to because some people are not emphasizing this aspect of it. The second one is that many of the technologies here do not satisfy accessibility requirements, like that matrix that I showed before. And we've gone through a little mini audit of their questions in order to identify the issues that we have here. This is green, meaning it's really good because it's just basically entering some scores, I guess. Fill in the blanks. As long as you do things properly, which gives you these eyes off of here, it satisfies WCAG 2.1 AA compliance. Unfortunately, the vast majority of H5P do not do this. If you go to one of the other exercises, something that might be a little bit more onerous, I'm looking for this one here. Actually, this one here hasn't even been reviewed. It's more of a, here's an image hotspot. This is a different type of approach. It's very graphical. It's very useful if you're not visually impaired. But if you are visually impaired, it becomes more difficult in order to be able to describe this problem effectively. This one here doesn't have an audit pasted into it. We do have it written down. We just haven't updated it to guide people in order to build accessible H5P exercises that can be embedded into your book formatively or embedded into ADAPT. Often this is ADAPT. So ADAPT is meant to be a very powerful infrastructure to handle homework summatively. And the technology is set up that when you get an account, which you can request an account if you log in and you when you try to, you can log in directly. When you try to log in, it will give you an option to say request an account. And you just fill out the information, give it to us, and we get it, and then we process the account. And the reason for that is that we need to be very secure with the homework questions, less with the questions, but more for the solutions, because again, the integrity associated with the homework and how we use it. So when you log in with ADAPT, it's a very simplified infrastructure. You have courses. In each course, you have assignments. In each assignment, you have assessments. The issue ultimately is what's the nature of the assignments and what's the nature of the assessments, because we have a lot of flexibility. Like I mentioned, there are 3 different types of technologies that underlie these assessments. This right here is my general chemistry class that I'm teaching right now. It has an infrastructure that's very similar to other learning management systems. Right now, I'm going to show everything. So this is everything that's part of my assignment, every assignment that's part of my course that students have. So I have surveys that are done in the beginning and the end in order to help guide self-efficacy confirmation. We have lecture homeworks because I believe in small little homeworks when students are not in class, or large homeworks, which are weekly homeworks. If you go to a weekly homework, for example, weekly 4, we have questions that are either open-ended or auto-graded. So here's an auto-grade question using WebWork. And here's the question that the students have in order to be able to do it, which is basically asking them to do something. The second one is open-ended, and this requires writing in or submitting a file that they write down in order to be able to create this thing. This is an OpenStax question. And that requires a human in order to evaluate, because they're just questions that you can do auto grading with right now. And they're questions that require open-ended grading. Open-ended grading can submit files, plain text, rich text, or even audio. For example, if you're teaching foreign languages and you want to use pronunciation or fluency as a mechanism in order to guide these things. We have this repository of 120,000 questions in there that come from the native repositories of MyOpenMath and iMath AS, in addition to another 30,000 questions that we've put in there from our H5P exercises and things that we've customized, for example, the OpenStax questions that I talked about before that were actively put in place. We are building collections of these things. So these are a collection, for example, of OpenStax chemistry session, and you can come in and say, here are the questions for chapter 5 of OpenStax, and you can use this as a mechanism to cycle through and pick and choose the ones that you want that are auto-graded. We're going to be transitioning these things to algorithmic, so every student would have a different question when it's available, and couple it into a mastery approach, because we'll be aligning these things to learning objectives. In the last minute and a half of this thing, I want to talk about why we call this ADAPT. This is called ADAPT because it has adaptive learning capabilities baked into it. And the way that we do that is via what we formulated as learning trees. So instead of giving just individual questions, which is a more traditional way of distributing problems, and I'm going to talk about these things only as auto-graded questions, you then distribute learning trees. And so learning trees has a root question that students can capitalize on. For example, this is the question. This is not converted to auto grading, but it will be, because this is an old tree from somewhere. And let's say the student takes it and fails. They then have the opportunity, in order to get partial credit or an ability in order to take the question again, if they spend 10 minutes going through the tree that guides them through different parts that would be necessary in order to master the question. So the idea is that this becomes then a virtual tutor in order to guide them through here. Right now, it doesn't guide them to say you're going to be looking at this thing. It tells you here are 3 different pathways, and let the students in order to be able to identify where they're going. This is meant in order to build agency, self-efficacy, metacognition, whichever way you want it, all those things, in order to be able to guide them as more of a choose your own adventure story, rather than saying this is exactly what you need in order to be able to do that. From that information, we can then give them signposts to say, you're more likely to probably benefit from here than there, but we don't want to be dogmatic off of here. So in other words, our assignments will then be assignments of trees instead of assignments of individual questions. And you can share those trees individually. You can expand these things out into be a big network, or you can have very small trees. And we're at right now is trying to evaluate what is good, what are good topologies, different organizations of trees. In other words, do you want to build something like this? Is this better than a sequential process or branching that's coming off of here? So with that, I think I have come close. I'm a few minutes over time. Like I said, the adapt is freely available for you. We just have to be more protective of solutions. So we give it out only to instructors that have verifiable credentials. And it's freely available for now, although we are looking into some sort of sustainability model in order just to maintain it, because we're not in the business of making money.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to see if anybody has maybe time for one question for our presenter this afternoon. Please either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. And I just want to remind everyone that we have our closing session at 4 p.m. and we'd love to see you attending that session to close the conference that we've had in the past 2 days. You want to say something, sir?
I pasted my email address here. So if anyone has any questions you want to take advantage of it, we're very excited about what the LibreVerse provides. It's an exceedingly powerful infrastructure for doing the sort of things that we want to do. And it's just getting bigger. So
awesome. I see a lot of thank yous, and I definitely see your email. So if anybody wants to continue this conversation and reaching out, please do so. The email is there. So we really am grateful for this presentation and learn about LibreText, and we look forward to seeing everyone in our closing session at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much for this presentation and attending.
Great. Thank you, everyone.